So as we speed towards the summer, we're getting into a time of the year where the weather isn't the only thing that's hot because the recruiting trail is really about to pick up. And today, we need to talk about one of the nation's top prospects who just dropped their top 5 in Kelby Collins. We need to discuss why this is such an intriguing prospect and the list he dropped and what makes it so interesting. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, Y for yes, N for no. And considering Kelby Collins is a top defensive lineman in the state of Alabama, and the Alabama Crimson Tide are listed, do you believe he plays his collegiate football for the Crimson Tide? And let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it. And if you enjoyed this content, like and comment down below, as those interactions may seem small, but they truly are massively impactful for content creators such as myself. But having said all that, let's jump right into this. And we cannot discuss this list without first understanding the 5 teams present. And those 5 teams, in no particular order, are the Georgia Bulldogs, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the Florida Gators, Oklahoma Sooners, and the South Carolina Gamecocks. So when we look at this, one thing is abundantly clear. Kelby Collins wants to play in the SEC, and I know Oklahoma isn't presently in the SEC, but they're going to be there sooner rather than later, no pun intended. So with Kelby Collins wanting to play in the SEC, which ultimately isn't a surprise whenever we look at development rates in the NFL draft, I mean, the SEC has just been doing phenomenal work. We now need to dive into the 5 teams present and understand what stands out for each and every one of them. If we go to the Georgia Bulldogs, that answer is quite simple. They're coming off of a national championship, and they're coming off of a defense that was sensational. Look at what they were able to do in the draft, and that alone is going to be a powerful recruiting tool. You mix that with a national championship, and you're going to pique kids' interest. Look, at the end of the day, Georgia has Kirby Smart, and Kirby Smart is one of the premier defensive minds in college football, so it's never going to be a surprise whenever they find themselves in these battles for top-rated defensive linemen. But on top of Kirby Smart, they also have Trey Scott, and he's proved to be quite successful at developing the defensive line. And so anytime you see the Georgia Bulldogs a part of a top 5, you know this is going to be a battle. You better strap in, and you better hope your institution is bringing it, because you know they are. But that moves us forward to the home state school, and that's the Alabama Crimson Tide, because Alabama has been synonymous with success. I could say they've been synonymous with defensive success, and that's absolutely true, but they've been synonymous with success overall. I mean, look at the draft rate out of Alabama, and it's head-spinning. Nick Saban just had his 41st first-round pick with the Crimson Tide this draft, a rate of development which just blows my mind. And because of that, it is absolutely no surprise whenever Alabama is listed in these top groups, especially if this individual is from the state of Alabama. It's going to be very difficult lifting players out the state of Alabama that the Crimson Tide are prioritizing. I'm not saying it's impossible. Recruiting is far too national now. We've talked about this. But at the end of the day, this is a position group that the Crimson Tide desperately are prioritizing this year. They didn't get the hits they would have liked to last year, not saying they didn't get good pieces, but they didn't really lose sleep about it because they understood this year's class on the defensive line is sensational. And luckily for the Crimson Tide, a lot of that talent is located in their state, so they don't have to go very far to try and keep them home, and they get the benefit of having that relationship that's already established while all these other schools are trying to make up that ground, which inevitably gives the Crimson Tide somewhat of an advantage. You mix on top of that Freddie Roach and his rate of development. Look, we talk about Georgia, and that's absolutely true, but everything I said about Georgia carries over to the Crimson Tide, and the thing that they have that Georgia doesn't is Nick Saban, and as great as Kirby Smart is, Kirby learned from Nick, and Nick is the OG, and until he leaves the game, hey, you gotta put respect where respect is due. But now let's move forward to the Florida Gators, and Florida is creating a lot of waves in recruiting right now, and why not? Billy Napier is really piquing the interest of the masses. And whenever you look at this, Florida's in a position where they really are trying to establish themselves as the Florida Gators of old. Billy Napier has hit the ground running and understands the necessity of recruiting, which whenever we take that soundbite of Dan Mullen saying, "I'm not worried about recruiting until the offseason," is a direct contradiction to the staff we just saw, which for Florida fans is a great job. Look, Florida Gators defensive line coach Sean Spencer is going to be heavy on the trail for Kelby Collins. Anytime you have an individual that ranks within the top 100 players in the nation and the top 10 in their respective position group, all the major institutions are going to come calling. But if you find yourself on a top list for that individual, now you know you have to take that work up a notch. And Sean Spencer is going to be trying to prove he's here to land these big-time recruits, and it doesn't matter what state they're out of. But what a statement that would be for the Florida Gators if they were to go into enemy territory and be able to pull a Kelby Collins out of the Crimson Tide's backyard. That would be an incredible get. But now we have to go forward to the Oklahoma Sooners, and Oklahoma has an intriguing piece here, and that's Todd Bates. We can talk about Brent Venables and the successful defenses he's fielded, and that's absolutely true. But really, whenever we're talking about this battle in particular, Todd Bates is going to be the separating factor. Because as true as it is that Brent Venables' defenses have been top-tier defenses in college football, whenever we look at them, they've been anchored by that defensive line, and there's been one consistent factor through a lot of those top defenses for Brent Venables: Todd Bates. Todd Bates' recruiting ability, Todd Bates' development ability is always an intriguing factor in these battles. And especially when we really look into who Todd Bates is and realize he's from the state of Alabama. So for him, he's going back home and trying to get kids out of the state of Alabama to then go play for the Oklahoma Sooners. That gives him some sort of intriguing connection to these individuals that other institutions just don't have if you're not the Alabama Crimson Tide, being the state that is in such close proximity. With that in mind, I think that means Oklahoma's in an intriguing place for an individual such as a Kelby Collins. Not to say that they're going to get him. This is going to be a fantastic battle. It's just that they have a recruiter on their staff that has an intriguing connection to the state of Alabama, and because of that, we have to talk about it whenever we're talking about these top groups in relation to the kids thereafter, because that is a relationship that could mean a great deal, and we'd be remiss if we didn't bring it up now. And finally, there's South Carolina. And South Carolina is generating a lot of excitement, not only on the recruiting trail, but in college football, and that makes me incredibly happy. I've talked about this at length. I think college football is better when there's more good teams. And Shane Beamer has hit the ground running. Look, getting in Spencer Rattler isn't going to be a determining factor in the battle for Kelby Collins. We know this. But what getting in Spencer Rattler does allow South Carolina is the opportunity to go into this season with a quarterback they like. And if that can translate into success, recruits are going to start viewing them differently. Recruits are going to start watching and thinking, okay, well, that's an institution I can get notoriety at. That's an institution I can find success at. So, this is an intriguing battle. This is a battle we have to watch. For a top 100 prospect in the nation, a top 10 defensive lineman out the state of Alabama, when the Crimson Tide have such a need for defensive linemen in this cycle. It's going to be very hard to pull Collins out of the state of Alabama, but there are heavyweight recruiters involved. Georgia in this conversation is always one we have to watch. Florida's really hitting the ground running right now under Billy Napier, and they're really trying to make waves. Oklahoma boasts a connection to the state of Alabama through Todd Bates, and finally, South Carolina is really in an intriguing position right now, and if they can continue having success, we're going to have a different conversation about them, but what a win Kelby Collins would be for them. But I can't wait to hear from y'all. Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. That's it. See ya.